Welcome to Behavioral Groups, the podcast that explores our human condition. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We talk with researchers and other interesting people to unlock the mysteries of our human behavior using a behavioral science lens. And we do that to help you find your groove.
We're going to discuss the books that we thought were most influential from our guests in 2023. So let's get started with one that really caught us by surprise. And this was by Nathan and Susanna Furr, The Upside of Uncertainty, A Guide to Finding Possibility in the Unknown. And Tim, this was one that just kind of snuck up on. I had not heard of Nathan and Susanna. It was really one of those books that kind of, I think, flew under the radar until we got a chance to read it.
Yeah, it was well written. And of course, like the big thing for me is that it was this science-backed guide for navigating and thriving through uncertainty, right? So we've got all these situations in our world that are not familiar, and we get really uptight about it. And what Nathan and Susanna did is really help me think about reframing uncertainty and looking at it with a different lens so that I'm not thinking about it so much as just this awful thing, but as something that's really good.
Yeah, I like how you talked about it's well written, but it also is science-backed. And so they bring in a lot of really good research about uncertainty, but also very practical things, as you said, reframing, right? Looking at the two different types. They talk about planned uncertainty and unplanned uncertainty, and potentially building in planned uncertainty into your life, and being just more open to the potential that uncertainty has. And that reframing of it, I think, is really important as we go. And it's one of the reasons that I absolutely love this book. I've used some of the insights in this, not only in my own life, but with my clients. Therefore, it was our first pick, not maybe in first pick overall. They're all great on these books, but the first one we want to talk about here in our top 10, 11 books. There we go.
Okay. And I just want to say that they help me think about uncertainty as something that can positively push new energy into my life.
Yes.
And so I just want to really encourage people to think about it from that perspective. Okay, so now let's discuss one of our favorite books on communication.
Okay.
And that was Todd Rogers, The Power of Brevity. And this was like a big bang, boom kind of experience for me, because it was so great to have all these sort of common ideas about how to write better, to be thinking about our writing with our readers in mind. And yet, man, he just really absolutely nailed it and had great research to back it up, and it had a tremendous effect on me.
It was one of those really applicable books for me. It was the one that I shared this with my family. And so we were sitting around the dinner table, and it was out there because I read over lunch sometimes. And so it was out there, and I you guys got to understand this, and here's how you do, and how do you shorten up messages, and why you should do that, and how do you look through all of those things. It was fantastic, really well written, and really applicable. So if you're trying to improve your writing for today, with busy people and everything that's going on, this was a great book, and really, really liked it. So
yeah, I would also just want to add that, the rules of writing have changed because our culture changes, and what's acceptable and what's normal changes. And that rather than being just a bunch of observations, Todd really just unmasked like the research behind what makes the guidelines for writing well in a world that is, overrun with social media. It just did a really, really great job.
Yeah, and I just want to, we picked Power of Brevity, but we also spoke with Matt Abrams about unlocking the power of effective communication. I can't remember exactly what his book was called, but another good book just on this topic. I think it's a very relevant topic at this point, and so both were really great books. So,
okay, now you and Mary had a great conversation with Yael Schoenbrohm, and I want to hear your comments about Yael's book.
Yeah, so all right, her book is called Work, Parent, Thrive, 12 Science-Backed Strategies to Ditch Guilt, Manage Overwhelm, and Grow Connection when everything feels like too much. And what I loved about this book is it's the everyday book. If you're a parent, this book resonates. It is one of those books that you go, yeah, I get this, and I felt this. Maybe not everybody, but I know for me, it really resonated. And not only did we think this book was great, this book won the 2023 National Parenting Product Award winner, and it was one of the finalists in the 2023 Next Generation Indie Book Awards. So this book really nailed, I think, a lot of things, and I loved it just from its message and the practical applications of it.
There were two things that really struck me, and the first one was this idea about reinforcing something that we're already really familiar with, this idea of focusing on a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. In some ways, that it sounds kind of dull, but I think Yael did it in a really, really great way. She wrote about it in a really effective way. And then secondly, and you and I have talked about this, is self-compassion. It's okay to have a bad day and to learn from it. And I felt like that was a really key thing. I know that that's been important to you as well, Kurt.
Yeah, it has been. And I think there's another aspect that for me was really important is this idea that we feel this guilt. Like, do I have to choose between work? Do I have to choose between my job? And I can't be everything to everybody. And there is that tension that many of us have. And we feel bad because I can't make it to, your kid's baseball game. I can't make it to the PTA meeting because I have work or other obligations. And what Yale is saying and what the research shows, this is the key piece, is it's actually okay. Your kids are going to be fine. Your kids are actually going to be potentially better for it.
Right.
And it's something, again, we know, but it's really nice to be reminded of that. And so that's why, for me, this was a great book, really took it to heart. And maybe it was just rationalizing my poor parenting abilities, but I don't know. There you go.
Don't over-index on the negative.
Another key piece that she talked about. There you go.
Yeah. Exactly.
So one other one that I want to talk about, and this was a return guest for us on the show, Jonah Berger. And we talked to him about his book, Magic Words, What to Say to Get Your Way. And what I loved about this is this idea, and there's been a lot of kind of focus on this year, which is, it's interesting how there's trends of different pieces. And these concrete versus abstract words, there's a big trend, I think. But Jonah nailed it. And it's just this idea that certain words are more impactful than others. They're better at changing minds, engaging people, driving performance and behavior and action. And he calls those magic words. And how can we take advantage of that power? And this book really highlights some, not only the science behind it, but some really applicable ways of when to use concrete words, when to use abstract words, how to use them good, and what you can really do in order to make that difference.
He also emphasized framing and reframing, and this is another theme that we've seen a lot of in books this year. But how you say things really changes the outcome of someone's reaction. Like the difference between saying "I'm going to vote" versus "I'm a voter," or I think I should help versus "I'm a helper." Like those little reframes, I think, are just delightful. And Jonah did a great job of not only teeing up really cool ideas, but packaging them with both the science and sort of the impact in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I think to that point, there's this application aspect of this book, which for me was really key. It wasn't just the science behind this. It wasn't just the here's how, here's the big picture. It got down into, here's how you actually do it. You can talk about being a voter versus voting, and you can use concrete words in these instances, but you use abstract words in these instances.
Yeah.
And you bring up self-identity and these types of, and so it was really, that was what I found really powerful about it.
Yeah. The next book that I want to bring up is by another return guest, Paul Bloom, and his book is Psych. That's Psych. And it's basically his Psych 101 class, repackaged. But I got to tell you, I loved it, not just for the nerdiness of it, but Paul's a really good narrator. He's a good storyteller and has really great narrative. And I really enjoyed how it really covered sort of the fundamentals of psychology in a way that actually made sense to me.
It was interesting because, and we've had this conversation as an aside, we might have even talked to him about it when we interviewed him, but he had a lot of Freud and Skinner in it, probably a little bit more than my liking, again, knowing what,
Yeah.
but what's interesting is he said, that they're the foundation. I mean, you can't look at psychology today without knowing the history, and they're the history. The Freudian aspect. I mean, it's part of our language for that, and Skinner and the behaviorism of that whole movement. It kind of changed the trajectory of what we were of where psychology went, and I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, for better or for worse, by the way. And seeing that arc of how the field has changed dramatically in the last 150 years is, I think it's a meaningful way of coming at the work.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next book is also by a returning guest, one of our buddies, Christian Hunt, and he wrote the book called Humanizing Rules. And there it is. And we just love the fact that he has finally written the book. On compliance. He's a friend and a colleague, and we're just really happy to talk to him. But the book is really a great way of rethinking this idea of compliance being all about the rules that sort of keep us in, to thinking about the rules as a way to engage people.
And so this is the thing. I went into this, and Christian, you can yell at me later for this, but I went into this like really kind of dreading reading this book. Because I'm like going, I'm not a compliance officer. I don't care about, not that I don't care about compliance, but it's not my thing. It's not the area that my expertise is. What I took out of this book is that the insights that Christian brings up, they're not just about compliance. These are behavioral science principles about behavior and driving behavior. And there was one piece in there that was, and I'm going to misquote this, so Christian, again, you can yell at me when you listen to this, is this idea of like, we tend to write rules without taking the human into account. And you really have to take the human side of people when you are putting in these aspects. And if you don't do that, of course your rules are going to be broken. People are going to be looking to break those rules. And that, I thought, was just, it's not just compliance. It is in leadership. It is about working with your kids. It is about, everyday actions at your community, organization, whatever it would be. Man, it was insightful.
Well, and agreed. And all the things that he says about compliance, typically coming from this place of don't do this, don't do that. This is out of bounds. This is off limits. He asked the question, well, why should we do this?
Yes.
Or that, And I love that it's a reframing, and Christian did a fantastic job of it.
So the next book that we're going to talk about is Adam Alter's Anatomy of a Breakthrough, How to Get Unstuck When It Matters Most. And for those watching YouTube, here it is, the great book there. And I like this because, as Adam talks about, we all get stuck, right? You get writer's block, you get stuck in a rut, all of those things. And we're not that good at getting unstuck. And Adam brings in ways to get unstuck. It was great, And
I love that he's using really great behavioral science research for these observations. So it's not just it's just not sort of back of the napkin kind of ideas. It's thoroughly well researched and well written. Adam's a terrific writer, and he talks about friction audits, which I think is a really cool way of just starting to think about, well, where where is there, where do I have a headwind in my life that I could really rethink, and that is sticking me, that is making me get stuck right here? Because I think that's a critical part of it, is some diagnosis.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the ideas that he has in there are very, again, this is one of, again, a reoccurring theme that we're doing is, hey, there's science, but there's also practical applications. So
Yeah.
any striving authors out there that want to get on our top 10 list, science and application. There you go. That's how you get there. That's what it seems like.
Okay, our next book is from a couple of our heroes. Dan Simons and Chris Chevry wrote Nobody's Fool, Why We Get Taken In and What We Can Do About It. And it's a fantastic read. I think that it's just absolutely terrific in that these two guys who have been collaborating for 25 plus years are just monsters in the world of behavioral science. And I'm really glad that they tackled this particular topic when we live in a world of such tremendous amount of misinformation and disinformation and scams and who do we believe, and they tackled those issues really, really well, I think, in this book.
And I like it too. Like you said, they're heroes, and they're, the hidden gorilla and all of that has been really great. And this, blindness that we have, the what's it called?
Inattentive blindness.
Inattentive blindness, right? This idea where we focus too much and we can lose sight of other things. This is really taking it to that next level and looking at why do we get fooled, right? Why do we get taken in? And so understanding that helps us be able to combat it to a certain degree. And again, that has really resonated with me as we're looking at, as you said, these days and ages where misinformation is rampant out there. Scams are, I follow a Reddit group that is all about trying to keep scammers on like text messages to try to get them going as long as they can so they're not, scamming others and, so egging them on. So they're spending more and more time with you, which is fascinating. But this idea that we get, for all the ones that we recognize, there are ones out there that we don't. And why does that happen? We get taken in a lot. And this is really kind of explains some of those reasons. So,
well, and they ask and answer, I think one of the most important questions then is, who do we trust?
Yeah.
And I think that they do an absolutely terrific job of that.
Yeah.
Our next book is just was super fun because it really caught us both off guard. Your Future Self by Hal Hershfield. This is such a cool idea. I just about beg all of our listeners to go out and get this one because it's so challenging in thinking about dealing with this blind spot that we have, that we think, oh, the future, sure, it's going to be a lot like the way it is today. Now, Dan Gilbert, 15 years ago, gave us evidence that we're terrible at predicting our future.
It was actually longer than that, 25 years ago.
Maybe it was 25 years ago. Okay. So, but Hal wrote a beautiful book about this particular issue, and I'm really glad that he shared it. And I really want to ask people to think about, if you care about your future, read this book.
Well, and what Hal is talking about is this idea that if we can tap into our future self and we want a better future for ourselves, that then it actually impacts our behavior today. And we don't do that enough. We don't look at our futures. Again, our future self is a different person. And so it doesn't have, that's a whole different person out there, at least the way our brain processes that information in various different pieces. And so how do you make that more real? How do you make that future self more you? And it was really well done and really loved it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and of course, he got to this idea that there's multiple me's, that over the course of my life, there's not just one me, there's multiple me's, but they all kind of exist along the same path. So I'm super excited about recommending that book.
Yeah. Book number 10 is Attention Span, a groundbreaking way to restore balance, happiness, and productivity by Gloria Mark. It was one of the more recent, last kind of episodes that we did this year. Found it really fascinating, this idea of attention span. And so Gloria studied this for 20 plus years and looking at attention and how it's changed. And that was the fascinating part for me, is just, we hear about this. We it's kind of anecdotal. Oh, our attention spans are shrinking, all this different pieces. She brings the research. Yeah, she brings the research into this. She says, looking at it, it's like 47 seconds. I think that's, if I misquote that, I apologize. But, we've gotten down to about 47 seconds where our attention span before I'm sorry, squirrel, and she does it through like the research that they've done on social media and following people's eye movements and tracking and lots of different methodologies that highlight that, and then talks about the implications for it. And I thought that was really good.
Two things for me. The first is she did a great job of letting me know that stupid story about humans don't have as much focus as goldfish is bunk. So let's start there. And the second thing, that I loved reading this book because Gloria does a great job of integrating this very complex person of who she is into the book, and all of her interests and the things that sort of the path that she took, I found incredibly interesting and valuable in the overall story of attention span. It was really well written. So again, another strong recommendation for that.
Yeah. And once again, I will go back to, all right, we talked about the science already, but she brings in some practical things. This idea that we're not built to be this hyper-focused being, human, that can really focus. So you know what? 90 minutes is about the most, and then you need a break. And if you take that break, you actually come back more productive than others. So there's some really practical applications in this book. So again, highly recommend people go out and get attention span. So,
okay, let's round out our top 10 books with the number 11 book. Right?
Because we're so good at math, Tim. That's our thing.
Not my strength. Thomas Curran's. I'd like to just end on Thomas Curran's book, The Perfection Trap: Embracing the Power of Good Enough. Boom. Just let that settle in, right? Embracing the power of good enough. I thought that was fantastic. Thomas, again, a really well-written book. Like, this was such a joy to read. And the whole thesis of the idea that perfectionism, we've known that it's an evil agent, in our lives for a long time. But Thomas does a great job of revealing the science behind why it's such an evil agent. And it was really, really really happy to read that book and to promote it as well.
And for me, it was that the book embraces the idea of satisficing. And, all right, that's my world. Maybe it's a rationalization that, hey, I'm not striving to be perfect, as anybody who listens to this podcast or watches these YouTube videos knows, right? I mean, we're not there. But
striving for mediocrity is much easier, by the way.
And actually, not even reaching that is where we are. So there you go. So, but this idea that, as you said, that the curse of perfectionism and Thomas brings in some really good research about all the psychological negative aspects that has on people who have that type of personality, who are striving for it. And this really goes to show that, hey, if you really want to live a really good life that is happy and you have great well-being, satisficing is probably a good tool to use in order to achieve that. And as we've talked a lot about finding your groove, and a groove, being this better life that you live, being the life that is going to be one that's true to yourself, but also one that brings you the most satisfaction and joy and well-being in the long run. This idea of satisficing and the not having everything always be, not saying that you can't be perfect in try or strive for perfection in some aspects, but if that is the overarching thing, that is not an easy way to find your groove. And so it fits in with our philosophy.
And after that lovely epistle, I would just like to say to our groovers, thanks for checking us out. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being a groover in 2023. We hope that you continue in 2024. We've got lots of great stuff planned. So with that, we hope that these books can help you this year, help you go out and find your groove.